welcome. This is John Golden from SalesPOP, online sales magazine and Pipeline of CRM. And today I'm delighted to spend a few minutes talking to John Elsey, who is the CEO of Richardson.
Hey, good morning, John. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, and John has a long and storied history in sales training, going back a long way. He and I share a lot in common. We both ran Huthwaite at different times, been selling Huthwaite at different times, and John and I work closely together. And now John is at Richardson, another world famous sales training brand. So today I wanted to talk to John about really the evolution of sales training, seeing as you've been in the business for quite a while. So John, do you want to just start off by telling me a little bit about what are you seeing as some of the major changes over the last number of years?
Yeah, thanks, John. You know, I think it's a really interesting time to be in the business. As you alluded to in the intro, I've kind of been around performance improvement and sales training for a number of years. And for a lot of that time, to me, it felt like the industry was actually relatively slow to evolve. And yet what I've seen over the last 2 to 3 years is that the need to change in sales performance and specifically sales training has really quickened the pace. And there are a lot of changes that we're making at Richardson to make sure that we're staying in front of those changes. But I think the first thing I would say first and foremost is everything that we're doing within our business is in response to what we're seeing in the marketplace. There are a lot of changes taking place in the buying landscape for our customers and indeed for our own customers as they look to engage our organization. I mean, so when we talk about how we're responding, it's rooted in some of those changes in buyer behavior that we're seeing through our research and our activity in the marketplace.
Yeah. So what are some of those major changes that you're seeing from buyers? Because, I mean, once upon a time, sales training was a bit of an add-on, right? It was something that people maybe did once a year or once every couple of years. Maybe when their sales had taken a dip, they would say, oh, let's bring in somebody, do a couple of workshops. What do you see as changing?
Yeah, a lot. Although I just want to go on record, I do think sales training is the sexiest end of the training spectrum, which is why you and I, enjoy
absolutely.
Working with it so much.
Absolutely.
I think, some of this, won't come as any great surprise, but, with every year it becomes more and more noticeable. I mean, buyers are just that much more informed. They've got access to a lot more information. They're using technology and leveraging lots of different resources across their organizations and in the marketplace. And that has a significant implication on sellers. Sellers can no longer just show up and be the purveyors of their own products and services. If I'm making a call to you and you already know a lot about my organization and the products and services that I have, I've got to have a different type of conversation. So certainly more informed buyers has implications for sales organizations. I mean, candidly, and we see this with our own customers, they're frankly more skeptical. And we need to be more effective at articulating the value of our products and services and the type of return on investment they may get. So more informed, more skeptical. We see many more stalled decisions and just no decisions to go ahead. And that's in part because, as you've probably seen and heard from some other conversations you've probably had, there's just a lot of competing priorities. And so the question is this important? Yes. Is it the most important thing that I have on my priority list? If not, then we see, the frequency of just projects just not going ahead significantly on the uptick.
Yeah, no, but we've seen that as well, and I think it's competing priorities. I think it's also that there's so many choices out there now that people almost get paralyzed by the amount of choices, and that comes back to your point where you really need to articulate the value and what makes you different. So tell me a little bit about how, say with Richardson, how has your products and services, how have they evolved to meet this new demand from buyers?
Yeah. I think we've done it in 2 different ways. We've thought about, first of all, how our core concepts, the content that we bring to life in our programs, how the content needs to evolve. So if we need sellers to show up differently and have different types of conversations, and if building relationships and creating value is to be done in a different way, then our fundamental programs need to shift. So we reflect that in a significant undertaking in product development to re-engineer programs for kind of 21st century selling. And I can share some information on that. And then we've also thought about how do we respond to some of the practical considerations that we see in the marketplace when somebody has decided to roll out a sales performance improvement initiative. They're not just more demanding, but they've got less time to take people out of the field. They want to see a better return on investment. They want to see evidence of progress. So we've really innovated around the format of our delivery, and gone are the days that our training programs are singular events, but they're very much, we're really, figuring out how to bring to life effective and efficient blended learning delivery strategies. So it's a product innovation from a content and also a delivery perspective.
Do you see any real changes, now with generational changes within, sales organizations, with different people and different generations coming into the sales force? Does that raise any challenges of its own?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, we've heard a lot of that. In fact, over the last couple of years, we've done quite a bit of research around what we call the multi-generational sales organization. And one of the themes that we hear from our learning and development executives that we work with is they really struggle to engage a multi-generational sales organization. So over and above I don't want to take people out of the field and they're super busy and they've got lots of things they're competing with, how do I actually get people interested in their own development and take this sales training initiative seriously? And so one of the more recent innovations that we've brought to market is a adaptive digital learning platform, which really brings in gamification, brings in data and analytics, heavy use of very latest video technology to kind of illustrate what best practice looks like, customer and seller scenarios. So we're bringing lots of different learning styles and different ways to consume content available to our customers, and recognizing that lots of different people learn in different ways, and we need to make sure we're meeting them where their learning style is, and really engaging those different millennials across generations, and indeed millennials across the sales organization.
Yeah, and I guess you also have the challenge nowadays of, once upon a time, the goal was always like face-to-face in-person meetings, right? Mm-hmm. But now, as we see a lot, we do it ourselves, a lot of organizations we work with do it, there's a lot of selling that's done over web conferencing or conference calling or Skyping or whatever. So have you had to adapt to helping people learn how to sell effectively through those mediums as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it manifests itself both in the way in which we deliver our programs, leveraging that sort of technology, distributed technology to connect with people before, during, and after an in-person workshop. And of course, sometimes that in-person workshop doesn't even ever take place. Mm-hmm. We do that virtually. But also through our kind of social selling and prospecting programs, making sure that sellers today understand how to leverage some of the tools that are available to them to really connect and build relationships in the way that, in the olden days, it was all predicated on face-to-face interaction. That, of course, is the goal, but is, not always possible. So we actually kind of build those tools and approaches into our programs more and more today.
Yeah, that's interesting, because we've seen a lot of that as well, just that evolution in how people sell. But get back to a more fundamental point that you raised earlier about people seeing the value of self-development and developing themselves. Is that still a challenge? Because it always was a challenge. Is that you wouldn't put somebody in charge of your accounting function, right, unless they actually had accounting qualifications and ongoing professional development and all of that. But in sales, we'll happily put somebody in sales who has absolutely no qualifications, and then if they become a decent seller, we'll make them a sales manager with even less qualifications or training.
You're such a skeptic.
But I know. But have you seen that start to change? Because that is something that has always been a challenge, is getting people to realize that sales can be professionalized and that people need to pay attention to their own professional development.
Yeah, no, I do. I think it's kind of the last bastion, and it's currently, it's now beginning to be addressed, the professionalization of the industry. And, there are a lot of people in this industry, not just the folks like ourselves that build and work with the best sales organizations, but also the people who work in those organizations who take their practice, their craft, and their skill very, very seriously. And I think that, increasingly we see the adoption of really thoughtful assessments, whether they be talent assessments or skills assessments, as a way to really engage people in their own self-development. People can kind of be somewhat cavalier about their approach to their own self-development. And if you thoughtfully use some of these tools early in the process, you can really kind of create an awareness in that individual by shining a light on the things that they do well and recognizing that, but also beginning to show them a path to how they could get better. And we use assessments to try and drive that engagement and self-motivation and self-drive to improving their sales execution. Most sales managers and salespeople are, highly compensated and orientated around, key success, having financial return for themselves and for their families. And if we can show them a path through development that will help, drive better results for themselves and their own organizations, in our experience, the vast majority of sellers actually will dig in and engage and be serious about their own self-development.
Yeah, so talking about the sales manager, because obviously that's the key to success of any initiative in a sales organization, whether it be training or otherwise.
Yep.
How do you guys engage and ensure that the sales manager is that pivotal driving force?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think, we talk about the sales managers being the force multipliers within any performance improvement initiative. Without their engagement, without giving them the ability to be successful, frankly, you're better off just keeping your money in your pocket. You almost are throwing your money down the drain. So, we engage sales managers by not only making sure that they're equipped to role model the selling skills that we expect of their sales organization by building programs to develop their own selling skills, but we also pair that activity typically with high-performance coaching sessions so that we actually equip sales managers to stop just answering questions, problem-solving for their sales teams, and going out and super selling. But we shift that mindset to a developmental mindset. So they solve problems by asking questions of their teams and really see their role not just as driving for results, but also talent and capability development of their sales organization. I think one other thing I would say is, again, it all comes back to the better use of data, analytics and technology in these solutions. What we're trying to do now through these solutions is give our sales manager customers great data on exactly where everyone on their team sits on a skills proficiency perspective. So when a customer engages with Richardson, they know exactly the skills proficiency for everybody on their team and in aggregate of their team, not just at the beginning and the end of a program, but they know how it's shifting over time. And that helps them prioritize who am I going to coach, what do they need to be coached on, and where am I going to invest my precious time to get the maximum return. So it's about leveraging great selling and coaching best practices by data-driven insights to prioritize their time and make sure they get the most of that investment.
Yeah. So what are some examples? You don't have to give names, but just examples of some of the organizations that you've seen do this really well now, and what makes them different?
We've had the privilege of working with the very biggest organizations in lots of different industries, in manufacturing and professional services. We have a lot of work that we do in financial services and pharmaceuticals, and the people who get the return are the people who take it seriously, who really go the extra mile to work with us to leverage some of that expertise. We kind of understand those predictive failure points and make sure that they're building a program that prepares learners and engages learners before formal training, who really, are thoughtful about creating highly customized sales training. Relevancy is critically important. And so that means that they've got to build a program so that when sellers have the opportunity to practice those skills, They're doing so in the context of real selling challenges that they face with their customers every day. If they're going to practice resolving objections, let's make sure we're resolving the objections that sellers hear in the field each and every week. And that they've thoughtfully thought about a scalable and repeatable sustainment solution through their managers, through coaching programs, and through content reinforcement over time. And what we see is those people who build the right architecture of a solution and importantly engage their sales managers, the types of results that they're seeing is significant. I mean, some of the recent surveys that we've done with our customers, we've recently worked with a very large manufacturing organization who have seen a 27% delta increase in the number of their sellers in their organizations who are driving to quota attainments. And that is game changing for that organization.
For sure. Absolutely. So as you mentioned earlier, as we wrap this up, you mentioned earlier that, sales performance improvement, sales training was the last bastion, maybe holdout for real focus of professional development. So do you think its time is coming now, and that people are realizing that this is where they need to put some extra attention?
Yeah, I do. I really do. I mean, in the last 18 months, the pace of change has significantly, quickened. And I think now that the industry is innovating at a pace that's appropriate for the change that's taking place in the buyer's landscape, those people who are taking up that challenge and responding accordingly, they're beginning to see some pretty exciting results. And show me a company out there that isn't concerned on the revenue performance of that organization, So it's our responsibility to come with solutions that really work and engage sellers and sales managers in a way that is practical for their situation. Where we get those two things working together, it can have a bigger impact on the performance of that organization more than any change in compensation or all the other competing initiatives that we see. And I do think now is the time. Now is the time for great sales training to drive performance across the industry.
Excellent. Well, thanks, John, for joining us this morning. Do you want to tell people a little bit more about Richardson and how they can find out more?
Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, go to richardson.com. It's an organization that's been working with some of the best sales organizations for almost 40 years. We specialize in building high-quality, highly customized programs that really address your selling challenges, allow you to unlock revenue and drive performance. So we'd be honored to have an opportunity to work with anybody out there in the industry.
All right. Thank you, John. Again, this is John Golden, SalesPOP Online Sales Magazine and Pipeliner CRM, another expert interview. And thanks again, John, for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks, John.